Welcome to CEO 101. This is where new hires of GitLab get to ask questions. I'm Sid. I'm a CEO and co-founder at GitLab, and Marcus has the first question. Marcus, you want to verbalize your question?
Yes, sure. Hi, Sid. So my question is, what do you think are the biggest pain points in maintaining our handbook, and what kind of tooling would you like to see to improve it?
Yeah, thanks for asking. The most important thing is that the handbook is up to date. Like most knowledge bases I've seen at other companies got out of date. And so what we try at GitLab is do things handbook first. So you change the handbook and then you communicate the change. It's not something you do after the fact because then you tend to forget it. So, and if there's a change, you don't send 2 paragraphs of text in an email, or you don't give a presentation. You just link to the change you made to the diff so people understand what changed. So that's the most important thing we do. Another thing we need to do a bit more, split pages up. If, for example, you go to our sales page in the handbook, it's way too long. It's because people are not super comfortable making new pages. So splitting that up helps. And then cross-linking, making sure that we don't duplicate things, but we just have a cross-link to the other location where it's defined and maybe a link back. Christine, you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, obviously GitLab is experiencing rapid growth. So what are some of the key things that GitLab as a whole is doing to maintain the company culture as we experience that rapid growth? And then how can we as new hires help maintain that culture?
Yeah, thanks for being interested in that. And thanks for asking. And I forgot to say, everyone, welcome. I'm a bit thrown off because we started a bit late, but welcome to GitLab. Thanks for choosing to work here. Reinforcing our values, we do in a bunch of ways. Or first of all, like culture is values. So our culture is our values. If you subscribe to those values, you fit into a culture. There's not another part of culture that we select for. And we reinforce those values in 11 different ways, which are linked in the handbook. You can contribute by talking about them, questioning them, saying, hey, does this correspond with the values? Because I think it doesn't really rhyme with this or that. And then one thing to help raise visibility is to kind of post videos. So you should all be getting an account on GitLab Unfiltered on YouTube. And it's always awesome to see someone kind of post like, hey, I'm now a week in at GitLab and this is my experience so far. So it's unfiltered. You can post anything you want, even things that are critical of the company as well. But feel free to communicate that. Matt, you wanted to elaborate a bit on that.
Yes, Christy and I were typing at the same time, roughly. Similar to Christine's question, I was curious about how, so GitLab's culture was I think for many of us, a huge draw, and it certainly was in my case. How do you see our ability to support that culture across the transition to being a public company? How do you see we can support that, and what are the most important things to keep as we grow?
Yeah, we're intending to keep everything. There's a section in the handbook on the leadership on becoming a public company. It explicitly notes that we'll keep being as transparent as we are now, because that's the thing people are most concerned about. But I don't think there's anything we have to change. So there's a lot of paperwork, and we have to get more consistent in the results we achieve, and there will be some other changes, but all in all, it shouldn't change the identity of the company nor our values. Oh, and if I didn't add, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time. Feel free to interrupt me even when I'm handing over the word to someone else, or feel free to add new questions at the bottom. Romer, you have the next question.
Hi, Sid. Hi, everyone. One thing that for me was really interesting was to see the handbook in the website. So how did you come with the idea to have the handbook public? And also, what were the main reasons for our values, for the credit?
Yeah. So the handbook was public because we started as a in the beginning of GitLab, the open source community around GitLab was everything, and we just started with a few people. And I always found that it's a big risk if you become a commercial company to either lose the community where people are not excited anymore, or to even have like rivalry between the two. So I figured one of the ways to reduce that friction between the wider community and the company is to at least be very open about what you do. So that's how that started out. Turns out that that benefit is there, and I think we've done a great job at making sure the wider community still likes what we're doing as a company. But one of the other big benefits has been onboarding new people and as a way to shape our kind of employer brand. The credit values, at a certain point we had 13 values, and I could name 3 to 4 of them, and most people in the company even less. So nobody knew. So it was clear we had to consolidate. So with John Hamm, my CEO coach, we wrote all of them down and we tried to group them. And then we did some checks, for example, seeing whether they prevented the 5 dysfunctions and a few other things like, hey, these are things every company should probably pay attention to. And we came up with this. And then I had an acronym for it, and I told my wife, and she's like, with the same letters, you can also spell credit. I'm like, oh, darn. Good point. So that's how we got to that.
Thanks.
Lorna, you want to ask the next question?
Yes. Hi, Sid. Thank you so much for the welcome. So my question is around diversity, one of the values here at GitLab. And I'm curious, how do you yourself personally define diversity, and what's your vision for seeing it implemented at its best here at GitLab? I feel like we're already very diverse, but I'd love to hear your perspective on how much more you see us becoming diverse, and what does that look like to you?
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to diversity, and that can go from underrepresented groups to geographic diversity to neurodiversity, how different people handle things differently. One important thing which someone once told me is like, you shouldn't apply it to everything. So sometimes things are, yeah, they're different, but it's a pretty frivolous thing. In that case, don't invoke diversity, because it means something bigger and more substantial. I think the thing that's most challenging still for us is having more underrepresented groups at GitLab. So for me, that's the primary focus of where we can still improve a lot. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Fabian, you have the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I have a sort of tongue-in-cheek question regarding the handbook. So I saw that in November 2018, it was around 2,000 pages, and then I just executed the same command again, and now we have 3,000 pages. And so it's growing quite rapidly, as is the company. And my question is, do you think that the reasons for this is that we are really like expanding our documentation, are actually quite good at capturing the change, or is it just very easy to add things and very hard to take things away? So I'm just like to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, both. And also you added that you will update the part of the handbook that counts our pages. So thanks for that. Yes. I do think the main reason it's growing is that we're just expanding as a company, and we're getting more process in place to make sure we all work together efficiently. So it's a great thing. But there's also some of the new sections are less succinct than they could be. There once was something where it said like, welcome to the handbook, or something, welcome to Department X, like stuff like that. Let's get rid of it. If it's not needed, we should keep it. It's already long. Let's keep it as short as possible. Removing things is much harder. That's why we're very focused on having a single source of truth. We shouldn't repeat information, because if you repeat it, it's hard to update. It's also hard to remove. Are we doing as good of a job as we can in removing things? I don't think we are, but I don't think it's a big problem right now. Over time, it becomes a bigger problem, and it tends to calcify. It tends to cause like the most important information to be hard to find because there's these irrelevant parts that are there. It's not so much information that is unneeded, but it's just not as important as some other things. So kind of balancing that is going to be very important.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we may need a little betting competition on how big the handbook is going to be in 2020 and see, if it fits any kind of curve.
Yes, although it's very important as a company, we don't measure our success in the right way. There's a saying in computer science, and measuring progress by lines of code is by measuring the quality of an aircraft design by the weight. Like you want as few as possible. So we're going to make sure that we understand. It's great that GitLab is now more and more team members. We want to keep the company as small as possible. Like hiring to solve problems is not the preferred way. Preferably you change the process or something else to not need it. And same with the handbook. The best handbook page is one that isn't needed.
Yeah, no, I have a feeling that at some point there may be a plateau where, the information to run is sufficient and then, people change, but it's not growing anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, I have hope that the handbook can be logarithmic because it should grow with the amount of layers in the company, and the amount of layers should grow slower because the amount of people you get with every new layer grows exponentially, but I'm not sure my math is correct. Anyway,
thank you so much.
Thank you. Dara, you have the next question.
Yeah, there are several meetings where we're sort of repeating ourselves or, with introductions, and certainly you had your Q&A earlier. As much as I'm sure we all so appreciate the time that you're spending specifically with us right now, I was just curious, are you getting something out of this as well?
Well, thanks for asking. Well, it's fun to meet all the new people. That's the first thing. The second thing is this is public stream. So things you're wondering about, imagine other people considering joining GitLab. They wonder about the same stuff, and we get to tell them beforehand. And then very frequently, a question gets asked where I'm like, we should document that better. And most of the time, I do that straight in the meeting. So we tend to improve things, and I could even imagine we now have two shadows joining, so maybe they see an opportunity to add something to the relevant part of the handbook, like, this should be there or here. Not sure we've seen something yet. Fabian's going to update the number of posts. For example, the credit story. Is that noteworthy? Should it be cut out of this video and embedded on our values page or on our culture page? I don't think it was that good of a story, but it happens all the time. So I think it's great. And imagine doing this, like just the sheer efficiency of being able to record this and publish this. I really appreciate that.
Well,
and the only concern there is that please do ask the hard questions. So don't hold back on anything or any concerns you have because it's published. Zach, right? You have the next one.
Yeah, hi, Sid. Just wondering on our path towards an IPO, what pitfalls related to internal controls do you anticipate that need to be dealt with most urgently, and how should we avoid those?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we'll probably do good. Typically, the hardest thing is to predict revenue. There's a lot of things you need to do for an IPO, and there's a big list in finance, and I can even show you like our IPO readiness sheet, IPO preparedness. So here you see that the hardest financial controls are hard. Audits, and things like that. The hardest thing is top of the funnel modeling. So that's basically the prediction of your future revenue. Do you know how much revenue you're going to generate next quarter and the quarter after that? That's hard because you're not in control. Like, that's customers signing up for things, not you making a decision. So it tends to be that cost is much more in control than income. I think it's for us. That's also going to be the biggest thing, like it is for many, many companies, the predictability of revenue.
That's great. Thank you.
Anthony, you have the next one.
So just come off mute there. Yeah. So my question is, what do you see as the next sort of trend shaping the way DevOps teams work? I guess, in brackets, you could put sort of team collaboration. I've been doing a bit of reading, and it seems that previously there was a preference for people to use individual tools, and now moving towards a single application. What do you kind of feel is the next sort of, I guess, stage or development of how DevOps teams work?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think we're still early in the single application phase. It tends to be when there's more innovation going on that you see like more diversity in the ecosystem, more different solutions, more different companies. And then as an industry kind of matures, it gets consolidated. And I think that's what's happening in DevOps. Like, we had the blossoming of many different tools, everything from portfolio management to feature flags, etc. And now we see the consolidation led by us, and then with probably Microsoft following as the first follower. That still has many, many years to play out. I think most companies right now still use like 50 different DevOps tools throughout the company. I think there's a long way to go before that's consolidated. And then it tends to be that it's mostly not the same aspect or not the same industry that then gets kind of unbundled again. Mostly it's an adjacent thing. And then what that adjacent thing is, I don't know. I think for now, you see much more that AI, ML, and data start becoming much more important. You see an explosion of tools there to manage that life cycle. Thinking about tools like Kubeflow. So I think that's probably the next frontier, where there's still now more and more tools, especially around like compliance, training, preventing black boxes, understanding biases. We're still privacy things. We're still very early there. So I foresee there more tools and only then consolidation. I think the DevOps tools consolidation, that seems to be a trend for like the next 10 years, but it's hard to predict things, especially in the future.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Pete?
Hi, Sid. Just have a question on how we keep balance between pushing some key features into CE versus, keeping them where we can actually sell them in products like Ultimate and Premium, so we can keep our, driving our sales growth.
Yeah. So we need to do both. Make features that help that we open source, and make features that people are prepared to pay for. We have a buyer-based open core model. Maybe someone can add a link to the section on the CEO pricing page for that. What it means is that we price our features based on what user cares the most about the feature. And if that's an individual contributor, it's great to open sources because they can contribute back to the feature. Individual contributors tend to be the people who contribute back to them. If it's a feature aimed at an executive, it tends to be paid, which is helpful because they tend to contribute less back, but also they tend to have a larger budget. And I think it took us a couple of years to kind of figure out this split, but so far it's been a great way to make sure that we have a steady stream of both, but we kind of pick the right pricing tier for each feature, including the pricing tier, which is like open source.
Great, thank you.
Jeremy.
Yeah, hi Sid. So I joined the UX team last week, and as you know, we're working on kind of a Beautify the UI project. And so I wanted to just kind of pick your brain. And my question specifically is, what adjectives would you use to describe the user experience and visual design of the product today? And how would you like it to be described in the near future?
I'd use the words like functional, structured, comprehensive, understandable, rough, brutalist, and I think in the future, I'd love to see more guidance, more beauty, while not losing any of that comprehensiveness and structuredness. And I think that the prose version of this is, well, I'm not going to say, maybe not prose, but the story version of this is that we've been masters of complexity. Like, even attempting to put the entire DevOps lifecycle in a single application, that's quite a tall order. And I think we've succeeded at that. And we're now, for people who aren't familiar with either GitLab or GitHub, people tend to say that the GitLab navigation is better. Even though we have a lot more functionality, we need to cram in there. So I think that's been an amazing achievement, and I'm very proud of the team for doing that. I think the reason that our product is a bit rough is that our UX department, our designers, our researchers, they tend to focus on the new functionality we're making. We're making so many new things and we need so much input there that's where the focus has been. And Christy is helping the department to focus more on the heavily used stuff. So not the new things at the edge, but the stuff that are in the center that are not changing rapidly. So they're not getting a lot of attention from our engineers and our PMs, but they should be getting a lot of attention from our designers, our UX people, because that's where the majority of the user time is spent. Then another thing has been, we kind of assume that the user already knows what to do, and then we want to be there for them. We have a world to win in like onboarding the users. And then we have kind of making it more beautiful and using a single design system, the pajama system throughout the application. We're still in the early phases of that, but that's showing a lot of promise. Does that answer your question?
Most definitely. Yeah, great answer. Thank you.
If there's no more questions, I'm going to give you back some time. And I want to thank you very, very much for attending this and asking the questions. Have a great time at GitLab.
Thank you, Sid.
Thank you.